Marriage isn't always a sacred thing. While the act of two people choosing each other to spend forever with is supposed to be an occasion filled with love and marital bliss, sometimes those feelings are only temporary, if they ever really existed at all. When manipulation, jealousy, and control take the place of all those things that define a healthy relationship, things can take a very deadly turn. When Emma Compton Layne married Russell Wayne Layne, control, isolation, and domestic abuse were what scared Emma into staying with the man that claimed to love her, but may have very well been the man to have ended her life. This is the case of Emma Compton Layne, and this is Gone in a Blink. Hey, true crime fans. I'm your host, Heather, and welcome to episode 23 of Gone in a Blink. I hope everyone had a nice and relaxing Labor Day weekend. While many people probably traveled over the long weekend, many of you, myself included, stayed home and just tried to catch up on housework, little fall decluttering, and some very much needed R&R. So today's case is out of Halifax County, Virginia. Today, we are discussing the case of Emma Compton Layne. I had the pleasure of talking with her sister, Shawna Krohn, and learning a bit more about the amazing person that Emma was and how, after 7 years, police have still not arrested her killer. So, if you're ready, let's jump right in. Emma Compton Layne grew up in Halifax County, Virginia. In a town where everybody knows everybody, Emma was loved by so many people. But no one was a bigger fan of hers than her sister, Shawna. Here's Shawna.
Tell me about your sister. Tell me about what it was like growing up with Emma.
Emma will remind you of a little Shirley Temple. She had that little round face and them little pipe curls. And we had like a little small zoo, nothing big. Just some animals that, people did, and people would come down, and everybody always wanted to steal Emma. Didn't nobody want me, they wanted Emma.
Did you both grow up in Halifax County, Virginia?
Yes, we actually grew up. Emma and him bought Daddy's place after Daddy passed away. Emma was actually living where we grew up.
She was living where you grew up when she went missing. That's where she was residing?
Mm-hmm. She was living where we grew up at.
Did she have any children of her own?
No. Well, he had 2 children, and she was a stepmama to them.
Emma began dating a man by the name of Russell Wayne Layne, whom she dated for several years before finally getting married. Shawna, however, was no fan of Russell's and really didn't want her sister to marry him. Russell had a history of domestic abuse and was actually still married to another woman when he married Emma. Here's more from Shawna.
When did she meet Russell Layne?
Okay, we moved into this house in 97. I want to say maybe early 2000s.
Early 2000s?
I remember when she told me, I wasn't happy about it.
Did you know him before, or did you just kind of get to know him when she started bringing him around?
It's like in the area, everybody grew up together. I know he and my brother, I don't think they run around a lot together, but some.
So he was known. I mean, everybody knew everybody. So you already kind of knew Russell, correct?
Yeah.
Okay.
His brother and sister, we went to school together. We was in the same grade.
So what was their? They ended up getting married, right?
Mm-hmm.
How long were they together before they decided to get married?
Maybe 10 years, because they got married in 2009 after Daddy passed away, and he got our home place.
So they dated for approximately, about 10 years, like you said, and then they got married. What was their marriage like? Were they having a lot of marital issues?
I don't know. I really don't think it was good from the get-go.
Was there any kind of domestic violence involved?
Yes. I mean, he would never show where he put his hands on her, but he was very verbally and mentally abusive to her in front of people, because I would call him out on it, and I guess it got so bad. Emma and I were talking one day, and she got to crying, and she's like, please don't say anything else to Russell when you're up here. She said, it's just worse when you leave.
You never saw any visible marks on her?
No.
Okay. Do you know if he had any kind of a criminal past?
I know that he had been married twice before, and he physically abused them. I think he had been arrested before. I can't remember what it was for, but he had been arrested before. And actually, when he and Emma got married, him and his second wife were actually still married. He was a bigamist when he married Emma. And I wish I'd have known before the fact. She did share it with me after she remarried him, because I'd have done everything in my power to talk her out of marrying him and sending him to jail.
One of the many reasons why Emma was so well loved and respected in the community was due to the fact that she owned and operated a convenience store called Cody Store. It was so much more than a convenience store, though. It was a place for older citizens of the community to gather and hang out and just be with other people. And everyone really loved it. Here's Shawna.
Okay, and what was the Cody Store? Was that a convenience store, or was that like a grocery store?
It was a convenience store, but she cooked and served food, and she had like 2 or 3, maybe 2 booths in there. And I don't know, where you live if they do it, but it's like a gathering place for the older people. And then like on weekends, some of the younger people would come up and sit around and listen to the old folks talk, elderly folks. It was just a convenience store. She sold different things, and like a convenience store, but she cooked hamburgers, chickens, pizza, and different stuff.
So did she own and operate this with Russell?
No, he wouldn't have anything to do with it. I mean, he would actually go to Daphne Lloyd's store over at Four Forks to even buy a biscuit. He wouldn't even buy a biscuit from Emma.
So she did this business all on her own?
Yeah.
On Monday, June 19th, 2017, Emma never showed up at Cody's store, which was extremely odd since employees were expecting her there that day. Concerned family and friends began trying to call her. However, she wasn't answering her phone either. Family decided to drive over to her house to check on her, and when they arrived, they found that her car was parked in the driveway, pretty much in the same spot it always is, and all of her personal belongings, such as her purse, her money, her cell phone, computers, credit cards, and even the store deposits were all inside the home. And her dog, Ladybug, was also inside the house. So Emma's oldest sibling decided not to immediately call the Halifax County Sheriff's Department. This could have been due to the fact that maybe she just wasn't sure if Emma was really missing or whether or not she was in any danger. A call was then placed to law enforcement the following day, which was Tuesday, June 20th. It is important to note that an employee from Cody's store had reported seeing her just a few days before on June 17th, 2017. Here's more from Shawna on Emma going missing.
So describe for me the day that you discovered Emma was missing, starting with the moment that you actually realized she was missing.
Mom and I had this thing where I always called her at 8 o'clock her time, which is Eastern time, every morning. I couldn't be early and I couldn't be late. Mama was in the hospital, and I called her regular time. And you could tell something was wrong by the way Mama was talking. I'm like, what's wrong, Mama? And she was like, nobody's seen Emma. I've called the house. She's not answering the phone. I've called the store. The girl said They called. They haven't got an answer. She hasn't been to work. Nobody knows where she's at. And she asked me to call Winona and get Winona to go down and check on her. So finally talked Winona into going. And in the meantime, I had called Russell, and I was like, Russell, did Emma have something to do for you this morning? You know where she's at? And he's like, oh, she's gone off with somebody. She'll be back later this evening. And that was a major red flag right there because Emma wasn't allowed to go nowhere with anybody. She wasn't allowed to have friends.
That was part of the abuse by Russell. He kind of kept her isolated.
Very isolated.
Okay, so what happened when you did all realize something's terribly wrong?
I wanted to call the law Monday, but Winona kept, and I don't know why I was stupid enough to listen to her. I should have did what I should have did, but I paid for that every day since. But I did call the law that Tuesday morning, and I should have never reported Emma missing. I should have told them on the spot right there that Emma had been murdered.
Was that something that you just felt deep down, that she was not just missing, that she was actually no longer alive?
I did. Any interview I did, I never said that Emma was missing. I was like, somebody come in that basement and hurt Emma and took her away.
Shawna feels that the investigation was botched from the very beginning. According to Shawna, Russell was never a main suspect, or basically a suspect at all for that matter. Russell made outrageous claims that Emma ran off to New York and joined the drug world. Then his story changed that she ran off to Florida. Shawna feels that law enforcement just bought into all these outlandish claims and therefore never fully investigated him. Throughout the investigation, he never really showed any concern either of Emma's whereabouts. It wasn't until 8 months after Emma went missing that officers searched the home that she shared with Russell. And by that time, any evidence that could have been collected was most likely gone. Here's Shawna.
To me, they did not take it serious because they were listening to everything Russell had to say instead of, they said they start from the house and go out. Well, they didn't. They listened to Russell. They called him Tuesday, got permission to go in the house and look around. And he's like, well, I can't come home till tomorrow. I got a load of chickens I got to drop off. So they didn't even tell him, no, you need to come now. And he didn't bother. He was unconcerned. And Russell was telling them, Emma was selling drugs. She took off with a guy in a black SUV from New York. And then that didn't work, so he changed, and she took off with a guy to Florida. And then it was like Emma was selling drugs, and she was doing this. And so actually they listened to him, and they stayed in Appomattox, a place that Emma did not go. I tried to tell them Emma went from point A to point B, point A to point C. She would go to South Austin. She would go to Alcevester. She would go to Lynchburg. And on occasion, she would go to Rocky Mount and Gretna. And they didn't listen to me. They stayed in Appomattox trying to find her in her drugs, and it wasn't so.
So were they just focusing on what Russell was telling them then?
Yes.
They didn't seem suspicious of Russell?
No.
Do you know if they questioned him?
I think they did after Emma was found.
Okay. Because a lot of times they typically, most departments, look at the husband first. Once they can rule him out, then they typically branch out. So they didn't do that with him, huh?
I don't feel like they did because they listened to everything. I mean, he went so far as like, well, she got hold of some bad dope and wandered off and got lost. Wednesday, I think it was Wednesday, they had a local search and rescue group come in and they searched, and divers went in 2 ponds, and they probably didn't even need scuba gear or whatever. And one of the gentlemen, he had a heart attack that day and he passed away. So that was completely stopped. And I had called Texas EquiSearch, and they had walked me from Texas all the way to Ohio, to the Ohio chapter. and got me in touch with Dave Rader. And he waited for Halifax, because when you have a search and rescue out, not in the county, out of state, Halifax has to invite them in, and they would not be invited in. So once the local, search and rescue, they called them off, that was it.
So Halifax County did not want any outside help.
No.
Is that right?
Sadly, 5 months after Emma went missing on Thanksgiving Day, November 22nd of 2017, hunters found her remains in a shallow grave located in a wooded area approximately 200 to 300 feet from the property line of her home in Natalie. Medical examiner results concluded that Emma was murdered on June 18th, 2017, and that her cause of death was traumatic neck injury causing death. She was only 52 years old. Here's more from Shawna.
Describe for me, and I'm sure this is extremely tough, but describe for me as best you can the day Emma's remains were discovered.
It was on Wednesday before Thanksgiving, and an investigator from another county and his son were hunting on Robert Wallace land, and the dogs took off, and it was like when he got closer, he could tell, so he kept his son back, and he called Halifax, and then they came down. But nobody bothered to call me that Wednesday and tell me, and people in Florida even knew, so the phones were buzzing. So Thursday, I was contacted and was told we wasn't sure if we wanted to call you or not, but we finally decided we would. And, I already knew, but it's not like being told. I started screaming because they didn't ask me, are you alone? Is Mark with you? He just blurted it out. And I did. I started screaming and crying and hung up, and I called Winona, and I'm like, they found Emma, and she was just like, I know, I'm at Florida. So I called Mark, and he was at his family's for Thanksgiving, and I'm screaming in his phone, and he comes on home.
So it was Thanksgiving Day when you found this out?
1:30.
Wow.
And they had known since Wednesday. I think it was like around 1 o'clock Wednesday when the investigator from Charlotte County, him and his son, like I said, were hunting, and they were hunting with dogs. And he said he knew once he kind of saw what the dogs were doing that was normal.
Where did they find her remains? How close to her home?
Our road was named Cherry Creek Road, which back when we was growing up, it was just a gravel road. And it was a property that they owned, two properties on Sandy Ridge Road. So I guess if you go from her house to where she was found on Sandy Ridge, maybe 5 to 10 miles. And she was found like 200, because her land was separated with an electric fence where they had cows on their side from Robert Wallace land. And from that property that they owned to where she was found out on Robert's land was maybe 200 feet. I hate to see it. I already knew it was an ugly place. I just knew in my heart. And it took me about 2 or 3 months to talk to Investigator Burton to taking me down there Wednesday before Thanksgiving in 2018. And, it was a long, rough walk. It was a dried up creek bed or something, or Logan Road or something. It was not an easy walk, going down there. So you got to think that somebody actually took a 135-pound woman way down there, or did they come around the pasture and stop there?
So what did they rule her cause and manner of death as?
Homicide, traumatic injury to her neck. And I believe she was put in a chokehold from the back and just kept squeezing.
So once they ruled this a homicide, did they go back and look and question Russell?
I think they did give him a lie detector test, but he failed it, and then hollered lawyer, and he actually showed up the next day, but it wasn't with a lawyer, it was with Stanley Morton, a friend of his. And to my knowledge, they haven't questioned him anymore.
Who do you think, in your own opinion, killed your sister?
Russell. I'm tired of holding back. I don't know who will hear this, but I'm tired of knowing and not being able to say. I think we still have the freedom of speech. I can't accuse him, but in my heart I know he did, no doubt. And I know the three that helped him put Emma where she was left.
Is Emma's case still part of an active investigation today, or has it gone cold?
They say Emma is top priority. To me, I don't think she'll ever receive justice here on this earth. She'll receive justice when they face God, but honestly, I don't think Halifax will ever give her justice.
So you would think, because they found her remains, was it 5 months after she went missing?
5 months and 4 days after she was murdered. I never said the word missing. It just would not come out of my mouth.
Did he bury her, or did he just kind of toss her in the weeds?
Grave, but when I got there, it wasn't anything. It's just like he lay right there. Emma had been living in the basement, and he'd been living in the upper part of the house for right at 3 years.
Okay, so they weren't doing good for quite some time before this. So today, the case is still an active investigation, and authorities are saying that they are making this priority. Is that correct?
Correct, which they've been saying that for a long time.
Do you have anything else that you want to add?
All I can say is, if Emma's a top priority, prove it to me. It's been 7 years, 2 months, and 24 days.
It's been 7 agonizing years for the family and friends of Emma Compton Layne. 7 years without any arrests in the case. Shawna continues to fight for justice for her little sister, and I admire her courage and strength to continue that fight. Many thanks to Shawna for speaking with me and doing this interview, regardless of how incredibly difficult it must be to relive this nightmare that she's living and being forced to move on without her amazing sister.
I appreciate anybody and everybody that takes their time to even tell them a story. It's not going to bring her back. It's not going to change anything. But if she can save one person, then I don't even know how to say it. It's kind of like if she can save one person, man or woman, then, losing her means a little bit more.
Thank you for listening to another episode of Gone in a Blink. If you or someone you know is dealing with domestic abuse, please know that you're not alone and help is available. You can call the National Domestic Violence Hotline at 1-800-799-7233.